On today's show, the Hawks are back in action on Wednesday evening in Milwaukee, but in the meantime, they made a roster move, a surprising, not necessarily shocking move, but it's always notable when the Hawks make a roster move in early March. We'll get into all of that and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 2183 of the Locked On Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Tuesday evening into Wednesday here in early March. And I want to encourage you at the top of the show, as I always do, to make Locked On Hawks your first listen each and every day. Check us out. Subscribe to the podcast, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. And I should also point out, I had a two-part episode with my good friend Ben Pfeiffer on the NBA draft that dropped late night on Monday into Tuesday morning. So check that out. It is certainly getting into full-fledged draft season now. Obviously, the Hawks are still playing, but it's the month of March. That means college basketball conference tournaments, followed by March Madness, and a lot of scouting opportunities. And the Hawks have 2 picks in the first round to be interested in. So between now and late June, a lot of draft coverage in this space. Prior to that, I had a breakdown of the game on Sunday, which the Hawks won their 4th straight contest. And we'll talk about that later on in the podcast as they aim for number 5 in a row on Wednesday. But there was a transaction today that we'll talk about early in the podcast, and later on, a question about the Pelicans-Bucks pick and the fallout of what's going on there. And then again, a preview of Hawks-Bucks on Wednesday. But first, the Hawks roster is full for the first time in a while. As I'm recording this on Tuesday evening, it's not been formally announced yet. So if you might have missed this, that would be potentially why. I can report, though, it's been confirmed to me multiple ways by the team, etc., that the Hawks are going to be signing Keshon Gilbert to a 2-way contract. Could be as soon as today, but could be as well as Wednesday. For some background, the Hawks have had an open 2-way slot for a while. If you remember, they waived Nikola Juricic from his standard contract a couple weeks ago and then converted Caleb Houston to a standard deal on February 19th, and that left the 2-way slot of Houston open. And that's pretty normal during the season to not always have a full allotment of 2-way guys, especially now that teams have 3 slots. A lot of teams don't even carry 3 all the time. But Wednesday, March 4th, which is tomorrow as I'm recording this podcast, is the league-wide deadline for teams to sign 2-way contracts during the season. After tomorrow, you can't do it anymore. And that leads to a lot of 2-way action around the league. There's been a lot of signings, a lot of guys being cut and added and waived over the last 2 days. That makes total sense. And I've been hearing for a little while the Hawks are probably going to sign somebody at some point because, look, the simple explanation is there's just no reason not to sign someone if you're the Hawks. It costs you nothing against the cap. It costs you, costs Tony Ressler a few dollars, but nothing crazy by his standards, obviously. And even if there's no massively amazing options available, only certain players can sign 2 ways. You have to have a limited NBA experience, for example. It obviously skews young because of that. But regardless, it just makes sense to take a flyer on somebody. Whoever the best guy is you can sign, go ahead and do it and have 6 weeks or so to evaluate that player before next season. So over the last couple of days, this is always going to happen from what I heard. And it landed on Gilbert in the end. He's a 22-year-old guard who'll be 23 in June. If you're a college basketball watcher, you might remember Gilbert from 2 years at UNLV and then 2 years at Iowa State at the end of his career. And he was in the draft last summer. So 2025 draft, he was not chosen, but he was a draftable level player that I did a little bit of work on back then as a kind of deep sleeper guy. Played summer league with the Wizards this past summer, then signed a camp deal with them, got waived, played in the G League some for the Wizards organization, then signed a 10-day contract in the NBA with Washington back in February and appeared in 3 NBA games. So he's been in the NBA, or at least around the NBA, for part of the season. 6'4" guard. He's played almost 40 games in the G League this year, averaging 15 points, 6 assists or so, 4.5 rebounds, almost 2 stocks per game. So decent numbers there. From what I've seen in college and also in the synergy look that I did a little bit today, he's been able to get into the paint. That's part of the appeal. I haven't watched full games in the way that I would for the Hawks, so keep that in mind. But I did see him a bunch in college. He's not a great 3-point shooter. 30% sub, 30% I should say, in the G League this year from 3. It was okay in college, low to mid 30s. Not huge volume, but he's kind of known as not a great shooter. We'll see how that manifests in the future. But he is managing to shoot 64% true shooting in the G League, which is actually really impressive. 54% on twos as a guard is pretty darn solid. Free throw shooting, very solid, gets to the line a decent amount for a guard. So defensively, not unbelievable, but projects to be decent there. Good size for a guard, pretty good athlete. Not a great one, or he would have been drafted probably, but certainly a guy who checks a lot of interesting boxes as a prospect. And look, overall, it's not a deal that I'll be talking to my nephews about in the future, like fondly remembering this two-way contract probably, but it's totally reasonable to sign Gilbert to a two-way. Like, especially when you talk about there's some urgency to go ahead and sign somebody. He's a top 100 guy in the last draft. I think Bassini over the Athletic, my friend there, had him in the 80s, draftable grades. He's been solid in the G League. He's young enough at 22 where he could, if he shoots a little bit better, perhaps be a rotation level player in the NBA at some point in the future. He may not be, and the bar is pretty low. Like I did a short earlier today on YouTube that people were like, well, "Who is this guy?" I'm like, "Well, it's a two-way contract signing on March 3rd. The bar is pretty low because you're only able to sign guys who are not on the team already. So keep that in mind as well. But no harm, no foul. And the last thing I'll say about this is that I got questions about why it would not be Kobe Johnson, the brother of Jalen Johnson, who's been playing in College Park this year after a decent college career at USC and UCLA, which is always strange to me. He's been out, though, for about a month with a hand injury, which could be part of the reason why. Also, I do like Kobe Johnson. I think he's actually a guy who could be on a two-way next year for the Hawks in reasonable fashion. But it's not so urgent that he has to be signed right now. It's not weird or crazy that it wasn't him. He would have been the most intriguing internal guy from College Park to sign, but it's not as if he's made it to where he just has to be signed by the Hawks at some point this year. So that's just like normal business. And also, as far as, I got a question today also about impact that Gilbert might make on the NBA team this year. My guess is extremely minimal, if not zero. For example, the Hawks have Ray J. Dennis, who is better than Gilbert right now, for sure. Like much more of a polished offensive player, point guard type, more experienced on a two-way contract already. So if the Hawks needed to go, let's just say, for example, McCollum turns an ankle, Dyson gets banged up or something like that, and they just need another guard that's available to kind of eat some innings for them. You have Keaton Wallace as well, but I would say Dennis is a lot more likely to play in an NBA game this year than Gilbert is. So Gilbert, I always kind of make this point, but with two-way contracts, there's often kind of two types of two-ways. There is the developmental guy who's like a more of a long-term play, intrigue, not like star upside, but certainly about like, hey, can we figure something out that he actually might be able to help us in a couple of years kind of play. He's more of that. Then there's the lower ceiling perhaps, but like more NBA ready type of player on two-way contracts. For instance, Keaton Wallace was like that. Keaton was 26 years old on a two-way. That usually means like we want a guy who can actually play for us a little bit right now. And it's less about the future. With someone like Gilbert, it's more of a future-facing one, whereas Dennis is like, hey, you can play Dennis right now, and he wouldn't kill you. That's the kind of gap there. So short-term, long-term, it would not surprise me at all if Gilbert was just not a part of the plan after this year. It would also not surprise me at all if he was. Like if he was popping up in Summer League next summer, back on a two-way contract, none of that would surprise me at all. So it's not a sexy transaction. I totally get that. But once you're past the deadline, it's basically buyout market and two-way guys. And now the two-way deadline is now going to be passed. So it's not going to be some crazy transaction cycle until the Hawks are eliminated and can make some trades this summer if they want to. But in the meantime, a real live roster move. And for the first time in a couple weeks, the Hawks actually have a full complement of 18 players under contract. Even if only like 10 or 11 of those guys will play on any given night, it helps to have more bodies around. You still have Koloko on the third two-way contract. You got Asa Newell in the G League right now, etc. But, a fine move, nothing going to change your life, but certainly one to keep an eye on if you're watching College Park, as I know my friend Kevin Chenard often is, another guy to watch with the Skyhawks over the next couple of weeks at the very least. Okay, in a second, I'll dive into a question that I got about the Pelicans-Bucks pick and its immediate future and more, plus a preview of Hawks-Bucks, and it's coming up in just one moment. Welcome to the 5 Hour Energy Flavor Draft, looking at every single aspect of the draft to let you know which tasty flavors are the best, which might be sleepers along the way. The board is set, the flavors are ready. It's only one thing that's going to be taking the top spot for me. At 5 Hour Energy, they have a huge, wide variety of flavors. There's always something for everybody, and 5 Hour Energy shots give you the boost that I love with zero sugar. I'm a huge fan of that. Plus, 5 Hour Energy has a ton of different flavor innovations planned in the future. Let your mind run wild right now with combinations, and they might actually use some of them. But there's also a ton of options that are tremendous already available. My favorite player and number one draft pick right now at 5 Hour Energy is the Peach Mango. It tastes amazing. It has real balance. And of course, it has the pickup that I really need in the middle of my work day or sports day or both. Plus, not the only flavor that I like right now at any means. You have strawberry banana. It's a huge delight for me. It tastes like a smoothie, easy to drink, rewarding flavor. And there's also that classic cherry flavor that I also always enjoy. It's bold, clean finish, etc. And you can't go wrong with any flavor of 5 Hour Energy. You have my picks that are already out there, plus cotton candy. They have grape, Confetti Crazy, Fruity Rainbow, Berry, Hawaiian Breeze, Sour Apple, Tropical Burst, and so much more. Find your favorite flavor right now at 5 Hour Energy shots, and you can do so online at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. One more time, check it out now at 5hourenergy.com. It's like being in an NBA arena when it comes to the crowd, the energy, and the moment when you're in that building. Getting tickets, though, not always the simplest or most pleasurable part of the process, but that's why Gametime is become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without any of the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs with you, the fan. And you can pull up the Gametime app right now, pick an upcoming NBA game, and have tickets locked in within just minutes. At Gametime, they have all-in prices up front, which I personally love to see. No surprise fees at the end of the checkout process. Plus, you can actually see the view from your seats before you actually buy the tickets. Makes the decisions really easy for you. At Gametime, they have great last-minute options as well. And they show up right before tip-off, honestly, at solid prices. Everything with Gametime feels quick, it feels intuitive, and it feels stress-free from start to finish. Guess we're going to buying NBA tickets right now with the folks at the Gametime app. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That code is locked on. That's LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. And remember, it's gametime.co, not gametime.com. One more time, download the Gametime app today and use that code locked on. All right, thank you for joining us on today's podcast. As always, make Locked On Hawks your first listen each and every day. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. And if you ever want to go ad-free or get some more perks, you can join the Everydayer Club right now. And the place to go if you want to do that is lockedonhawks.supercast.com. And a question that I got in the mailbag over the last couple of days. By the way, the mailbag is always open. Send questions on Twitter. Send questions to the email address, which is lockedonhawks@gmail.com. Patreon, all that stuff. Send them in. I don't always open the mailbag on purpose. Just kind of keep the questions flowing. And I appreciate all the questions always. This one came from Shep, who says, I don't know if you would have heard it, but Bill Simmons talked about how the Hawks should have traded the Pelicans pick in November and made it seem like an obvious mistake that they didn't do that. Do you agree with that? And what's the deal with that pick right now? So first, I did hear this. People send it to me. I get it. I get sent Hawk stuff. National media folks say all the time. That's part of the job. I get it. And I am not speaking ill of Bill Simmons, who is a lot more talented of a podcaster than I'll ever be, honestly. And it seems to be something of a renaissance right now for Bill. He's having quite a peak. I think they're calling it the re-apex, something like that. It's been fun to kind of follow that along. And look, a lot of us, probably including me, would not be doing stuff like this without Bill Simmons. He was like pretty transformational. I think him and the No Dunks, formerly Basketball Jones, the starters guys, like really kind of paved the way a lot for a lot of people like me. So I'm not killing Bill at all. But we have also disagreed sometimes on evaluations around the Hawks. My favorite one that I always remember is that he absolutely killed the Hawks for trading Dennis Schroeder to OKC. He called it an F minus trade. And I actually like that deal. And I think it made sense for the Hawks at the time. It was basically getting off of Dennis's contract in exchange. It was a procedural deal, which is always complicated. I get that. But I think that I was right on that one in the end. It doesn't matter. I'm often wrong, but I think we look at things a little bit differently, Bill and I, and also his takes are a little bit, just generally a little bit more hotter than mine are. That's kind of the deal. National podcasting is different than local, all that stuff. On this one, though, it's something that's not surprised to hear from a national voice because the Pelicans are winning more lately, and the possession of that pick is a little bit down because of that. I also strongly disagree with the opinion that he shared here, and I would say that it's one of those things that sounds maybe reasonable, but doesn't really hold up if you look at it a little bit more deeply. For example, the one thing that you could reasonably say is that the Hawks could have offered that pick for Giannis. Like, that's possible, and they could have done that. I did say on the show, and I stand by it, I would not have traded the pick for Giannis, but it is totally defensible if they wanted to do that. Giannis is a inner circle Hall of Fame player. That's the kind of player, he's a little bit older than you would want, but still, that would have been, it's an argument to have, which people were having a lot, obviously, in January, February, etc. With that said, aside from Giannis, what were they supposed to trade that pick for? Like, picks like the Pelicans-Bucks pick don't get traded. That's honestly why, a big part of the reason why the reaction was what it was to the Pelicans trading it to the Hawks at the draft. And rarely do you ever see like 100% agreement on a trade. And every single person loved it for the Hawks and hated it for New Orleans. That's very rare, actually. And it's because that kind of pick, unprotected, just doesn't get traded very often. You didn't hear a single whiff of any team in the top 8 this year at the deadline looking to trade that pick because there's no reason why they would. Without some crazy offer coming back, like the Wizards, the Jet, no one was like, hey, I'm going to trade this pick. That was never happening. And it shouldn't at this point in time. And with where the Hawks are, I guess you could say it would have made a little bit more sense than a typical rebuilding team, which is why I brought up Giannis. But Giannis LA has been consistent about this. They're taking a long-term approach. You don't have to agree, but that's what they're doing. And you don't trade an unprotected first-round pick with a double, chance basically in a loaded draft just a few months before that draft arrives without some crazy, crazy, crazy return that wasn't really available. So I can't see why Bill, somebody said, I can. It's because the Pelicans have been winning more, and they're not going to end up with one of those bottom 3 or 4 records in the league. I know Hawks fans wanted that to happen. It would have been better for everybody involved if they did. That's not going to happen anymore. And I get their response is like kind of panicky about that. But if that's, it's true. But if you follow the podcast this season, you will know that like it was always likely that they were going to win some games in the second half of the season. That's why it was so important early on that the Hawks basically avoided, the Pelicans getting hot early, because they were always going to win more late than they did early. And that's because of a number of things, but a lot of the league is tanking right now. Like a pretty big percentage of the league is tanking in suboptimal fashion for everyone involved. But the Pelicans are the one team near the bottom that was always going to have a reason to try because they didn't have their pick. So that means more wins. They also got a really healthy stretch from Zion, who played like 35 games in a row. Zion playing that much is like kind of unlucky for the Hawks, honestly. And kind of strangely, in my opinion, it's not left on Pelicans. New Orleans is kind of embracing the sunk cost fallacy and benching their rookies in favor of like veterans who are not part of their future, just trying to like save face and win games. Like I'm all for competing. That makes sense to me. But like playing DeAndre Jordan more than Derek Queen at times is like kind of insane to me on a team that's clearly not going anywhere this year. But regardless, the pick was traded already. They're winning more. That's what matters to this conversation. I think the discourse is often ignoring that the Pelicans, even if they're like 7 or 8 in pre-lottery odds, and right now, by the way, to answer the question that was also asked here, they're currently projected to win the sixth fewest games in the league, taking purposes. Yes, that's by ESPN's BPI. They will, that's kind of where they are right now as well. I think the one team that they probably might chase down is Dallas, but Dallas, I would say positively for the Hawks, has Cooper Flag, and he won't just sit the rest of the year, I don't think, so that's going to be maybe helpful. And then Memphis has 4 more wins than New Orleans right now. Memphis is definitely in a tailspin, but they are, that 4-game cushion matters. So I would probably project the Pelicans to be 6th heading into the lottery, maybe 7th. We'll see. But even if you're talking about, let's be pessimistic for a second and say they go in like 8th. Still a decent chance to jump into the top 4. And again, a totally loaded draft. Because importantly, and this gets lost all the time, it's not just the Pelicans. That's the big thing people are kind of ignoring about this. It's like, oh, every Pelicans result, like it matters a lot. Trust me. The Pelicans have been the focus the entire time with good reason. But if the Bucks miss the playoffs, you are adding in those lottery odds on top of the Pelicans odds. It's the better of the 2 picks. That's always what's making it such a crazy asset, was that you get 2 chances at it. Even if it's 2 smallest chances, that matters. And right now, ESPN's BPI has the Bucks with a 2.3% chance to make the playoffs, which means a 97+% chance of them to be in the lottery somewhere. Even with Giannis back, maybe it's higher than that, but it's still like 90% that they miss the playoffs. And that is a pretty good thing when you're trying to be a Hawks fan right now. So I think there's generally too much doom and gloom right now about the Pelicans pick. I do get it. It sucks when they started winning. It was like kind of going to happen, but it's like, oh man, they're really doing this right now. I understand. But I think people are not living in reality to act like the Hawks were going to trade that pick in November or December, because it was like higher on Tankathon then. That was kind of basically Bill's thought, like, hey, it had more value then. Well, yes, it did, I guess, in theory, but the whole league knew the Pelicans were going to try to win games the whole season. So it was not like they were ever projected by like league experts, people who actually watched the league closely, to be, number 1 or number 2 in the lottery odds. Would that have been nice? Yes, but they had no reason to tank. That was always the thing. And there was just, it's not practical. There was no world in which Ansi was going to suddenly like hold an auction in December to trade that pick. No trades happened until January in the entire league. Like that's just not going to happen. I get it. I like to live in the real world, basically. And I like to be kind of maybe overly pragmatic, but that's what I'll say for now. And hopefully this won't be a segment that I have to do later on, but it's probably smart to remember that the Hawks traded the 13th pick in last year's draft, which was Derek Queen, for this pick from the Pelicans or Bucks, and it's Pelicans or Bucks, better of, and they got the 23rd pick in last year's draft as well, which became Mason Newell. So That was part of the reason why, like this summer, I said this many times, even if New Orleans was better than I thought they were going to be, and if they like win a ton the rest of the year and that pick ends up 10th or 11th, it's still a really, really good trade. Is it as sexy? No, definitely not. But the Hawks got 2 picks for last year's pick. And this is, again, if you told me, what would you rather have? The 10th pick this year or Derek Queen? I'd take the 10th pick this year. I just would. And that ignores Asa and any of the upside. And it's always hard to like, it's woulda, coulda, shoulda stuff. I understand that. But you still want to make the bet. And you're hoping that the lottery gods shine on you. And the Pelicans, again, I think the pick could be as low as 8 or 9. That's unfortunate for the Hawks, for sure. But the combination of 2 teams' odds and potentially the floor, it's in a pretty good spot. And we'll see. So I was in no beef with Bill whatsoever. In fact, I know people have asked me this like similar questions about this in the past. Like, hey, it was the whole thing about Giannis, but even like, should they trade the pick? And by the way, I will probably talk about this a little bit later. I got a mail question. I'm gonna just kind of check and see who asked me. It came from Rakshan, actually, who basically asked, like, post lottery, if the pick falls to like 7, could the Hawks trade it? And the answer that I'll give you in more deep fashion later on is yes, they could. I think if it's top 3 or 4, they're not trading it. But if it falls to 7 or 8, like, they could trade that pick. I'm not saying they should or that they will, but it's like possible. Regardless, I think that the answer to answer the question finally in one sentence, I do not believe the Hawks should have traded that pick at any point unless there was some Godfather offer available that I never was aware of. And from what it's worth, the entire time, even with Giannis, but anybody, it was like, no, that pick is not available. Like, full stop, not available. And I get why, because it could, again, use the word could, end up being someone like Darren Peterson, Cam Boozer, AJ DeMonsa, pick your guy that you like, Caleb Wilson. It could be one of those guys. It may not be, but it could be. And for more on the draft, by the way, listen to the 2-parter with Ben that I dropped yesterday. All right, in a second, I'll dive into the Hawks-Bucks, which is a weirdly late-night game on Wednesday, and it's coming up in just one moment. It is tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's actually not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in, meeting a real person, and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local. That's TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment today. All right, the Hawks are back in action on Wednesday. A little bit of a preview of Hawks-Bucks in that game. Atlanta has won 4 in a row, and I broke down the 4th win. In fact, all of the wins have been broken down on this podcast. If you're new to the show, check out that show from Sunday for the 4th straight win. But if they get this win, they'll be over 500 for the first time since mid-December. It's been a while. Not a given by any means. I'll just say this now, actually. The Hawks are favored by 1.5 points at FanDuel right now, as of Tuesday evening. That could change, but essentially, that's a coin flip game. The Hawks are narrow favorites. That just means that they think that the Hawks are the better team, which I agree with. But the game is in Milwaukee, so that kind of levels the playing field, and Giannis is going to play, which is notable. Also, this is the only road game for the Hawks over a 4-week period. They have 5 home games, then one on the road, which is this one, and then 5 more home games. So it's a super, super light, really favorable stretch for the Hawks, and they have 2 days off heading into this game. So not a bad spot at all for Atlanta. Matchup-wise, they've only played once this year, Hawks-Bucks. It was a 2-point loss on MLK Day in Atlanta. If you remember, that game was a weird one. It was best known for the Hawks having their worst shooting half possible in the first half, basically. They were down by 23 points because they missed their first 20 3-point attempts in that game. It was one of the worst shooting halves, I'm not kidding, in the history of the Hawks franchise. That's how bad it was. And they almost won anyway. They came all the way back, and they narrowly lost at home, and haven't seen the Bucks since then. So that's interesting. Only played them 3 times this year. But the Bucks are actually in a weird spot right now. They were really overachieving for a lot of February. Without Giannis, they went 8-2 over a 10-game stretch. That was genuinely shocking to me. Even with a pretty light schedule, they won a lot of games there. That was actually interesting, and there was some panic about on the Hawks side about the draft pick, but also that the Bucks are trying to catch the Hawks in the play-in race. But since then, they're 0-3. with 3 losses there were all blowouts. They lost in order to the Knicks, the Bulls, in which they gave up a 27-0 run, and then they lost to the zombie Celtics, basically, without Jaylen Brown and others. So they've been playing poorly lately. And Giannis did come back Monday and played in that game. He is limited for minutes, but Giannis is obviously still really good. He helps them quite a bit. On offense, Milwaukee's a top 5 team in the league in shooting efficiency, and they're number 2 in the league in 3-point percentage. So that's an area where the Hawks have to be buttoned up in this game. Milwaukee shot the heck out of the ball all year long. On the flip side, the Bucks are terrible on the offensive glass, and Giannis is really the only one on the team who gets to the line at all. So if you can keep Giannis off the line, that would be encouraging for the defense on the Hawks side. On the other end of the floor, the Bucks are bottom 10 on defense this year on the whole. Giannis does help that, but they don't really create havoc at all. That's a typical Doc Rivers thing. And they're bottom 5 in the league in 3-point volume allowed. So the Hawks should be able to break the paint and create some good looks from 3 in this spot. I should say it's a kind of a double importance game. I did the segment earlier about the draft pick. Clearly the Pelicans are the more impactful part of that formula, but the Hawks do need the Bucks to not make the playoffs. Like, that's full stop. That's an important part of everything. And right now, the Hawks are going to enter this game 4 games ahead of the Bucks in the standings. 5 in the win column, 3 in the loss column, 4 games ahead. Also, the Hornets are 3.5 games ahead of the Bucks. So the Bucks are not dead at all for making the play-in. They're unlikely to make the play-in, in my opinion, but they're not dead at all. It does help, actually, the Hawks in this one aspect, that Charlotte has been playing really well for a long time. So the percentages of Charlotte holding off Milwaukee are encouraging, especially because Atlanta also is in the mix there as well. But it's a doubly important game. Let's say, for example, the Hawks win on Wednesday. They'll be 5 games up on Milwaukee with less than 20 to go. That's not insurmountable, but that's a huge, huge lead. If they lose to Milwaukee on Wednesday, it's 3 games, and that's still a lead, but it's not quite as safe. So I don't want to overemphasize it at all, but as far as the draft is concerned and the play-in race is concerned, it's a pretty big one for the Hawks, honestly. Injury-wise, the Hawks actually have no injuries at all to list. That's a pretty rare occurrence. I know they ended up being fully healthy on the game for the game on Sunday, but Jalen and Nikhil were on the injury report until the end. They ended up playing, but no one listed at all for the Hawks in this spot. It would be nice to have Jalen back at his full form after he kind of struggled on Sunday, but regardless, that's been encouraging. The Hawks are still listing Dennis and Newell as being in the G League, and they're doubtful to play, but everybody else, health-wise, is there for the Hawks. And Kuminga has been really good for 3 games. I thought about it a lot on Sunday, but this is certainly the most difficult opponent the Hawks have had since he's actually been playing. But it's been all good to date, and a nice little test for the Hawks in the new look era with Kuminga, Jalen, everybody back, and again, fully healthy. That's a rare occurrence late in the year. On the Bucks front, only one injury of any note, and that's Taurean Prince. Old friend Taurean Prince is out with a neck issue for the Bucks, and again, Giannis is back. But that's the only other issue. I have to give this number, but the Hawks are 1.5-point favorites in this game, and a lot of intrigue. Final PSA. This is a national TV game. It's still on FanDuel, so if you want to watch Bob and Neek, as I will be, honestly, it's available to you. But that's the reason why this game is at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. I assume ESPN just didn't have another option. And looking at the schedule, they really didn't. The only other game that's late night potential on the schedule on Wednesday is Pacers-Clippers. Indiana is tanking, so the Hawks are using the Bucks as the Central Time Zone team and playing an 8:30 start local, 9:30. It's the latest game of the year for the Hawks. It's brutal from a watching standpoint. I totally get that. Somebody asked me why that is. It's a scheduling thing. It's above the Hawks' head. They can't do anything about this. It's a road game. It is what it is. But stay up late, lock in, and if you don't want to or just can't because you want to function the next morning, I get it, and that's part of why I have the podcast. So I always do the podcast through the lens of whether you watched the game or didn't watch the game. I will hope to give you something that you can take away from the contest, because I know it's a lot of games. There's 82 games every season. Not everybody can watch every game, and I try to check all those boxes along the way. So that's all I have today on this episode. One more plug. Listen to myself and Ben from Monday night, 2 parts on the draft, and then prior to that, game breakdowns, mailbags from last week. It's all still relevant right now, and it's been a fun time to cover the Hawks in the last couple of days, and potentially a 5th straight win if they can put it together on Wednesday. Please stay tuned. Subscribe, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Follow the show on X/Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. Follow me on Blue Sky at BT Rowland. And then follow my non-podcast work on the Hawks, which can be found at Patreon FanDuel.com/BT Rowland. Everybody, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday into Wednesday, and we'll see you after the game in Milwaukee.